Today, I have the privilege of introducing our invited Insight speaker, Ms. Jane Browning. Ms. Browning formerly served as executive director of numerous nonprofit organizations during a lengthy career. Ms. Browning also served as an appointee to the President's Committee on Mental Retardation within the Clinton administration. Browning is a self-described lifelong political animal who will review the official actions of the recent Arkansas General Assembly and add her in-depth perspective. Some of the bills passed represent a direct assault on civil rights of Arkansans, such as limiting voting, limiting medical access, and stripping away equal protection of various minority groups. Her presentation will offer some glimmers of hope by her focus on bills passed which actually do benefit and promote the common good for Arkansas. Following her presentation, Ms. Browning will participate in our post-service conversations in the community hall. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Ms. Jane Browning. Jane?
I know that the Insight program is secular in nature, but if you will please indulge me, I would like to start with a prayer I am borrowing from Mary Ann Williamson. Please bow your heads. Dear God, we give this day to you. May our minds stay centered on the things of spirit. May we not be tempted to stray from love. As we begin this day, we open to receive you. Please enter where you already abide. May our minds and hearts be pure and true, and may we not deviate from the things of goodness. May we bring your love and goodness with us to give unto others wherever we go. May we see the love and innocence in all mankind, behind the masks we all wear and the illusions of this worldly plane. We surrender unto you our doings this day. We ask only that they serve you and the healing of the world. Make us the people you would have us be. Direct our footsteps and show us what you would have us do. Make the world a safer, more beautiful place. Bless all your creatures. Heal us all and use us that we may know the joy of being used by you. My name is Jane Browning, and my decades-long career has basically consisted of leading organizations dedicated to advocacy for people with disabilities and those reentering society from prison. Before returning to Arkansas in 2011, my family lived for 22 years in the D.C. area, and I spent a great deal of time on Capitol Hill, lobbying for difficult and often unpopular legislation, like the Prison Rape Elimination Act and the Second Chance Act, both of which passed in good time. I've been present for the filing of a House bill, attended many subcommittee hearings, and testified before a few, spoke in the Capitol building on a panel moderated by Attorney General Eric Holder, and sat in on a conference committee in which the Senate and House bring together bills that they have both passed to reconcile their differences. I was there in the good old days when the legislative process worked according to time-honored rules and processes, and when bipartisanship was a given. For an especially amazing example of this, the two Senate sponsors of the Prison Rape Elimination Act were Ted Kennedy and Jeff Sessions. In the interests of full disclosure, I am the current president of the Democratic Club of Hot Springs Village, a social club not directly affiliated with the Democratic Party. Also, my big sister, a church organist and social worker, now deceased, was a lesbian. In a spirit of sincere compassion, let's examine the social atmosphere of 2021 as we begin to emerge from the devastation of COVID-19. We have been granted a temporary reprieve from the daily fear and anxiety emanating from the White House of the recent past, and are blessed instead with competence, intelligence, and kindness. Finally, America is confronting racism, climate change, immigration dilemmas, police brutality, and mass incarceration. What a menu. But the people now in charge are willing to confront these perilous issues head on. The chaos that ruled Washington, D.C. for 4 long years has been pushed out. Unfortunately, it has taken up residence in our state houses. The 93rd General Session of the Arkansas State Legislature passed scores of bills of a radical right nature, taken from the template of national conservative organizations and applied cookie-cutter style across at least 16 states, mostly in the South. Can I have the slide of the bills? This is from Advocates for Children and Families. This is a part of the compendium of the bills that they paid attention to during this legislature. You can see how involved it all is. This is one page of 11 that they have on this. So there's a lot going on. One of the most egregious players in the legislative mill is ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which collaborates with the private sector to develop model legislation for mass consumption. Another very secretive group is Heritage Action for America, which actually drafts the bills for the various states. These voter suppression and civil rights extinction bills were passed in such a flurry of quick action that a number of these bills actually contradict one another. The Republican supermajority, and if I could have the next slide, that's the supermajority. It's such that there's virtually no obstacle to the onslaught of crazy legislation. To give you one example, the Stand Your Ground bill was defeated in committee where it should have died under the regular rules and procedures. Instead, proponents of the bill did an end run around procedure and brought that bill to the floor where it was passed. The rules did not apply in 2021. Railroading held sway. This session of the legislature is generally regarded as a catastrophe for civil rights. Civil rights organizations are coalescing into coalitions to fight back in the future, but the only true solution to the attack on citizens' rights is to restore balance between the political parties and influences in Arkansas. If you bring up the next slide. A little bit lopsided, as you see, and getting worse. One of the first bills to be proposed this year was the Stand Your Ground bill, which grants immunity to shooters who feel threatened. Opposition was very strong, and if COVID protocols hadn't kept opponents from attending hearings in person, they might have prevailed. My own personal concerns are about people with autism and mental health issues whose odd behavior is very often interpreted as threatening, when in fact it is just odd. Stand Your Ground encourages people to shoot now and ask questions later when it is too late. Also early in the session, a couple of bills proposing the prohibition of teaching the 1619 curriculum in Arkansas classrooms. Never mind that there is no evidence of it is being taught in Arkansas classrooms, and withholding funding from schools that rebelled. The 1619 curriculum derives from a series of scholarly Black history articles published by the New York Times that explores the history of slavery in America, 1619 being the year that enslaved people first arrived in Virginia. Similar bills passed in many of our sister states, but the attempt to censor education in Arkansas was met with widespread opposition by teachers, school administrators, and African American parents that included rallies on the steps of the state capitol. I personally emailed letters to every one of the 20 members of the House Education Committee, speaking as the co-author of the 8th grade textbook on Arkansas history. This textbook has been taught to Arkansas 8th graders for 30 years, since its publication in 1991, and it is filled with the good, the bad, and the ugly of Black history in Arkansas. Those 1619 bills failed. You can see the little indexes here that I have marked pages. Each one of these represents a passage and or a photograph of Black history in Arkansas. So the horse is out of the barn. A raft of voter suppression laws passed swiftly and without meaningful opposition, restricting time available for voting and complicating the rules applied to voter identification. One example of this relates to provisional ballots. Up until now, a voter whose identification doesn't pass muster at the polling place, a misspelled last name, or an old address perhaps, was issued a provisional ballot and allowed to vote. Those votes were counted last, and they could be thrown out in the event of an extremely close election. Now, the provisional ballot must be hand-carried to the respective county clerk for verification before voting. Regarding this bill, I concentrated on contacting members of the Judiciary Committee, explaining what a burden this imposed on senior citizens and on people with disabilities for whom transportation is often unavailable. That bill passed. One of the most insidious bills would strip the democratically elected county clerk of her powers and hand them over to the appointed representatives, the election commissioners, if a vote tally were to be considered suspicious. This license to overturn a legitimate election by partisan elected officials could very well spell the doom of democracy. The legislature also stripped the governor of his authority to declare emergencies, such as that which resulted in the COVID-19 mask mandate. A medical conscience bill passed, granting all healthcare providers and insurance companies free will in refusing to treat any patient in a manner they interpreted as going against their conscience. We are all aware of the high ethical standards of the insurance industry. This backdoor manner of severely restricting abortion and all other medical procedures was overshadowed, however, by the blatant total abortion ban sponsored by Senator Jason Rapert of Pocahontas and signed into law by Governor Hutchinson in early March. Lawsuits have already been filed, but remember, if that law is struck down, that medical conscience bill is on the books and ready to serve in its place. Arkansas now tops the list of anti-abortion states. Tenants' rights is an issue that advocates have long sought to enact, Arkansas being the only state in the union that criminalizes the inability to pay the rent. This legislature pondered reforms, but in the end passed a completely watered-down version that still doesn't hold landlords responsible for even the most basic repairs. Likewise, a weak attempt at a hate crimes bill passed, which does not even name protected classes of citizens. Not only were LGBTQ citizens denied protections under this law, they were utterly stripped of their civil rights in two bills affecting the transgender community. First, transgender girls are banished from school sports. Secondly, transgender youth are heartbreakingly denied all medical treatment relating to their gender status until they reach age 18. This bill passed despite a veto by the governor, who was moved to act responsibly by a meeting he had with parents facing this very issue. The legislature overrode that veto. Such bills are opposed by organizations dedicated to children's health, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Association of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, the National Association of Social Workers, and more. These attacks on transgender youth are fueled by discrimination, not facts. The Human Rights Campaign condemns this action and will use every tool at its disposal to fight against this law. The ACLU and the ACLU of Arkansas are preparing a lawsuit to challenge and block the transgender healthcare ban before it takes effect. Despite this onslaught of civil and voting rights, there were glimmers of hope in this session as well. Senator Joyce Elliott managed to maneuver passage of a bill that funds the Arkansas Housing Trust to the tune of $5 million. The Housing Trust makes grants and loans to nonprofit organizations engaged in providing affordable housing all around the state. Teacher pay was raised $2,000. Per pupil spending was increased from $6,899 to $7,349 over 2 years. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but that's per pupil. You multiply that all together by the number of students. That's a significant increase. Dreamers, covered under the DACA provisions, came away with big wins, being granted eligibility for state scholarships and certification as teachers, and licensing in other professions. Likewise, a bill allowing bilingual education passed. The legislature also voted in favor of continuing Medicaid expansion in Arkansas. Guidelines to schools regarding limitations on restraint and seclusion are now codified as law. The use of restraints and seclusion has been very widespread in our schools, especially as they are applied to special education students and African American children. Now teachers will be held by law to certain standards of conduct. Corporal punishment, however, is widespread as well and awaits our future attention. The state of Arkansas is ending the year with a $717 million surplus, possibly more. You can expect legislation in the fall granting yet more tax cuts to the wealthy, despite the fact that the teacher pension fund is $70 million in the hole. I've heard a rumor, though, that Governor Hutchinson is not planning to seek additional tax cuts. We shall see. There you have it. Now, next on the legislative agenda is redistricting, which will take place next fall. The first Board of Apportionment meeting was held Monday, May the 24th. Judging from the conversation in that meeting, the redistricting process will be a rush job with very little opportunity for public input. To keep track of this board's activities and a whole lot of other state business, text RCAN to 313131 to get daily updates by text on the schedules of boards and commissions, legislative sessions, and press briefings. RCAN to 313131. And they just text you every day. There are aspirational bills that were introduced in this session that just didn't get very far. One of these, online voter registration, would be a very positive mood for Arkansas voters, especially us old folks who enjoy the easy access, and young folks who are used to doing absolutely everything on their phones. Look for this bill to reemerge and get behind it. Arkansas is one of very few states that do not already have online registration. Likewise, another push for passage of the Earned Income Tax Credit continues to go forward. The law would help low to moderate income families get a state tax break. All but 7 states offer this tax credit already. In order to better prepare for the fall session and for the 2022 legislative session, advocates are building coalitions, organizing from the ground up. Of special importance is engaging advocates in rural areas of the state, where most of the legislators reside. Messages coming to elected officials from Little Rock and Northwest Arkansas are largely ignored as emanating from the enemy. It is up to every one of us to establish and cultivate a healthy relationship with every one of our state representatives and senators. Merely writing to or calling your representative when a bill is up for a vote is not enough, especially now that forces other than constituent will is driving the legislature. During this interim period through the summer, Try to actually get to know your representative. In an email, or better yet, snail mail, introduce yourself and the issues that concern you most. Give them a picture of who you are and why you should be heard. Ask the legislature for a face-to-face meeting. This is not very likely to happen, but it could be that your representative would be willing to meet with you and perhaps a very small group of your neighbors for a cup of coffee to get acquainted, talk about important issues. If the representative has an office, you might be able to meet him or her there. Another route to getting acquainted is to find out your representative's schedule and show up at the events that he or she is attending, Labor Day celebrations, and so forth. It is important to avoid hostile exchanges. Keep your messaging positive and polite. When the time comes for you to advocate for or against a particular bill, your opinion will count. If you want to join a group effort for reform, there are many to choose from. Disability Rights Arkansas is spearheading a coalition including NAACP, ACLU, and Indivisible, among 20 other groups, the Coalition for Southern Values. They launched their action with an open letter to the legislature published in the Sunday Arkansas Democrat Gazette immediately after the session ended. Advocates for Children and Families is going all out to recruit citizen activists, or get active in a local or a state election, or run for office. My advice, find your niche and get to work. In closing, please let me share excerpts from another prayer recently published in Sojourners. It is entitled, "A Prayer for My LGBTQ Kin." The author is Reverend Megan Rohr, Bishop of the Sierra Pacific Synod of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Shepherding God, be palpably present with us when we dance, snuggle, and enjoy the sensations of the creation you declare good. Dwell with us both when we are able to articulate our pride for ourselves and others, and when we get stuck in a cacophony of negativity, bodily shame, or unjust laws. When we are tired, weary, and exhausted, grant us the rest and renewal we need to keep on marching, advocating, and living openly. When it feels like time is moving too slow or change is not possible, take the load, block the wind, refresh our hearts, give us purposeful work, anything that helps those on the edge to choose life, to get through the month, the week, or the hours, to move time a bit closer to the safety, acceptance, and love we all need and deserve. Help us to live and act with bravery, working within and without, educating ourselves and those around us, so that we can do the work generations to come need for us to do. Amen. Now, in the spirit of love, mercy, and inclusiveness, I wish you all good things.